Story 1. Companion for Hire. Becky was a nurse's assistant by profession but did side gigs for the elderly, being a companion on the weekends for extra money. The extra money allowed Becky to save for what she would hope one day would put her through nursing school to become a registered nurse. She loved being an aide, and the patients and family members adored her, but with all the experience she had, she was ready to further her career, financially speaking. Through word of mouth, Becky was offered an overnight gig in the adjacent town. She didn't think much of it and accepted the offer immediately. It was $500 for barely 10 hours of work. She was so excited at the amount of money that she asked no questions. She had some challenging clients in the past, so she figured this was most likely a difficult case or demanding family members, but nothing that she couldn't handle, especially for $500. Curiosity got the better of her, so she searched for the property on the internet the night prior, and it showed this beautiful mansion and landscaped property. She was so psyched up for the gig that it was all she could talk about to her roommates. The night finally arrived. Becky was to report from 6 p. to 6 a. She noticed during the last leg of the drive that her phone went into SOS mode. She didn't panic though, and figured she could at least make an emergency call. It took Becky about 35 minutes to drive to the property. Upon arrival, her jaw dropped. It was nothing like the picture on the internet. It looked abandoned, and the landscape was little to be desired, with overgrown bushes and grass. Appeared as though it hadn't been kept in years. She took a deep breath and proceeded to walk to the front door, telling herself that it was worth the $500. Upon approaching the doorbell, the door creaked open halfway. Becky nervously called out. An older woman appeared and signaled for Becky to come in. Becky's eyes grew large, and before Becky could back out, the creepy-looking woman told Becky that if she stayed the entire 12-hour shift, that she would pay her an additional $250 for $750 total. Instead of Becky letting her nerves get the best of her, she was more focused on the $750. The lady gave her a brief tour of the home, brushed by the room that Mr. Sparks, her client, was in, and hurried away. It was just Becky and Mr. Sparks in the eerily dark, damp, and cold-feeling home. But Becky kept telling herself this was all for $750. Her phone still had no signal, not even SOS. However, there was a house phone, so that helped reassure her some. Becky anxiously walked around a bit and slowly got the courage to go into Mr. Sparks' room to try to focus on the job at hand. He had already been fed, bathed, and had his meds for the evening. Becky assumed either another aide or the lady that just left took care of everything, so all she literally had to do was watch over him and help him to the bathroom. Mr. Sparks slept the first few hours as Becky watched the television that was playing in the background. Mr. Sparks didn't speak well. He mostly grunted and pointed when he needed something. As the night progressed, Becky's eyes began to get heavy. She didn't know why, as she was used to working all shifts. So she got up and began to walk around some. At this point, it was about midnight. She was halfway through her shift. The idea of the $750 was starting to sink in. She was thinking if she wanted to invest in school or splurge the money. All of a sudden, she heard a thump. She called out for Mr. Sparks. When she went back into the room, Mr. Sparks was not in his bed. She continued to call out for him and even looked into the bathroom. He was nowhere to be found. All of a sudden, that heaviness overcame her again. That was all she remembered. Becky awoke the next day in her car. She was in pain, her back, her abdomen. There was some blood present on her clothes. She gasped and assumed she had been raped. She called 911 and passed out again. 2 weeks later, Becky awoke in a hospital. There was a police officer standing in her room at the bedside. He was there to take a victim statement. Her doctor informed her that she was the victim of organ trafficking, that one of her kidneys had been harvested, and that she was fortunate that she was still alive. She had not been raped, but the blood that she saw weeks prior was most likely from the surgical incision. Becky was in shock, but also felt foolish for believing that someone would actually pay her $750 for a nurse's gig. She remained in the hospital an additional 2 weeks recovering, and the cop that was working her case told her that the property was for sale and locked, that it appeared no one lived there and hadn't been for years. Moral of the story: sometimes when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. Not only did Becky not receive her $750, she has one less kidney.